Quest software has solutions that allow you to add an additional layer of security to your Microsoft environment. To learn how they can help you protect and detect changes in your environment, please go to quest.com/MPM. Make sure your team is prepared to fight off the latest cybersecurity threat. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team skills up to date. You can stream IT Pro TV's courses live and on demand worldwide, so there's no need to send staff to off-site training. Their team solution provides access to a supervisor portal for full control over your team's training schedule and group analytics. Visit itpro.tv/enterprise security and use the code ES30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. Pony Express. Check out their line of penetration testing devices, including the Pwn Pad, Pwn Phone, and Pwn Pro. For enterprises, there's Pwn Pulse, providing continuous visibility into wired, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth spectrums across all physical locations, including remote sites and branch offices. For all those hard-to-reach places, there's Pony Express. Visit them on the web at ponyexpress.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. I'm here with John Strand on the lines via Skype to talk about some of the news articles that we have today. And we've got some great stuff to talk about. I'm excited this week, John. The articles, I think, are of quality talking point discussions. The first is Gartner has positioned LogRhythm in the Magic Quadrant for SIEM, which I think is somewhat doing them a little bit of a disservice because there's so much more than that. I wouldn't necessarily lump them into the category of SIEM. I think Gartner's done a poor job of recognizing new categories. There's, an off-air conversation we can have about that. I don't agree necessarily with the way Gartner has carved out categories. I think there's a lot of new and innovative companies carving out their own categories that are more exciting than some of the more traditional ones. And I think LogRhythm has carved out what they're calling Threat Lifecycle Management Platform as their category. We're going to dig into that actually after the show. But what I like and what John and I were talking about the LogRhythm solution is they actually do very tactical things very well, which I think is sometimes glossed over when you look at other analyst firms. John, would you largely agree?
I agree. I think it's kind of this weird thing to be like, oh, congratulations, LogRhythm, Gartner sucks. It's kind of a weird thing. But I think both you and I have had long conversations about, or just like for Gartner, there's a tremendous amount of times whenever we're testing organizations, they have product X in place. We bypass product X, and then they come back and they say, well, wait a minute. That was in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. How could this travesty happen? And it bothers me because I don't believe that organizations like Gartner, like you said, trying to break down what the different categories are in the security industry, they're doing a horrible job at that, number one. Number two, they also, there's many times where we see products rated much higher than we think they should have ever have been rated. And what it boils down to is you only get the opportunity to test a product by really getting your hands dirty and actually using it. And a lot of the Gartner analysts, who you and I both know many of them, and we respect them, they may hear about what a product does, they may see what that product does in demos, but they don't actually get their hands dirty all the time with that product. And I think that's really a disservice to Gartner.
A lot of them do. It's part of some of the testing, and I don't know if it's Gartner or another analyst firm, that you do as a vendor have to provide them with the tools so they can actually use them. But I don't know how well that testing, in my experience, when I've seen that testing done, it's not a real world kind of test.
Let's just use an example and then we'll move on. We love Carbon Black. I think Carbon Black is a fantastic product. And a lot of people, when they run Carbon Black, they run it in the lab of 4 computer systems. And it looks fantastic, right? You can see absolutely all the processes, what threads, what connections were made. It's great. But then you start trying to scale that up. And you realize that you have to scale up your staff to actually meet the capabilities of what this tool can actually do. So there's a lot of times where something looks great in a small lab, but whenever it actually starts scaling out in the environment, your organization has to scale with it as well, and it may not perform the same way it did in the lab. So that kind of like that little tiny hands-on 4 or 5 systems in a lab really doesn't actually do a lot of these products justice. And I think that's also, Paul, why we see a lot of products that are in the marketplace. And when we're testing and we're doing what we do in our day jobs, we don't see those products because they're not actually being implemented correctly. So this is a long thing. We turned it to a dig on Gartner. We shouldn't have done that. It really should have been a congratulations to LogRhythm, which was very well deserved.
Yes.
We do like their product, and this is a company that gives Netmon premium, which is They're giving their product away for free for people to play with it. That shows guts, and we like that a lot.
I can't wrap my head around this Lumeta article.
Dude, no.
It's talking about, so they are claiming that it's the most comprehensive security solution for IoT, delivering 100% network visibility in real time. Now, what I'm really trying hard to give them credit for, and I'm not finding, is that if you search the article and you search their website product description, so like I really did try and find this, there's no mention of wireless whatsoever. They call it IP-based 100% detection for IoT. In that aspect, it is completely flawed, as we just did a great webcast with Pony Express, who are actually providing IoT security solutions that actually work for like major football organizations at major such events and things of that nature.
Like the CFL, maybe. I don't know.
We can't say that on the air, but
no, can't.
You can't say that.
Something football league. I don't know which one. There's like two of them.
Yeah, exactly.
3,
so,
maybe.
But they're actually doing it, and highlighted for me, even opened my eyes recently about how important it is to monitor the wireless airspace, not just for Bluetooth devices, but also for how your wireless clients are behaving. In our own environment, John, we haven't even shown you this data yet. In our own environment, they found that there were clients on the Security Weekly that were connecting to our wireless network here, but also connecting to a doctor's office down the street, to an open Wi-Fi network. And so the wireless threats are real, especially when it comes to IoT. Some of these might not even be connected to the IP-based network at any given time. And like what happens if stuff comes and goes? So to leave that out and claim that you have 100% detection for IoT is the most false point of view on a particular problem that I may have seen this year.
Well, and here's another example of what we've actually seen in assessments. So if you look at a lot of power generation, power relay stations, transformers, and things like that, there's a lot of out-of-band communication for various devices where you're basically pulling telemetry off of certain things. So let's use an example. If you can actually monitor the wireless space and you can say, okay, everything in our entire infrastructure should be end-to-end LTE, because if you actually try to stand up a femtocell and intercept, it's harder to actually be able to inject and sniff traffic. It's not impossible, but it's harder. But nothing should be running CDMA or legacy GSM. Well, there's a huge part of doing an assessment, doing it correctly, that requires you to actually monitor those frequencies to make sure that they're no longer being used. Because what happens, all it takes is one engineer. It's like, yeah, we need to set up out of band. Here's this crap device. Let's plug this in, and now we can dial in and we can do out of band management telemetry. So that I love that example of wireless, because there's so much happening in that spectrum that we just do not see, we do not understand, and it's not necessarily IP based. IP is involved, but a layer below that may be something else completely.
Next up is an interesting partnership between CA Veracode, with their Veracode, which is acquired by CA, and Optiv, basically to offer training. So helps organizations further optimize software security programs and minimize risk with e-learning curriculum powered by CA Veracode. And I tell you what, if I wanted to increase my awareness in my organization about software security, Veracode's a great place to go for that. They seem to know a lot about it, for sure.
Yeah, so. They're a customer of ours. We've worked with them for a number of years. Veracode is an extremely solid product. We like them. And by the way, I can say that. They said we can say that, so I'm not breaking any NDAs or anything.
That's awesome.
So I love that Veracode is actually moving into the space of actually doing some training with a company like Optiv. Now, mind you, full disclosure, I'm an instructor for the SANS Institute, senior instructor. I teach 504. And I know I'm supposed to say SANS only all the time. But the fact is, whenever you're working in security, you should try to get training anywhere you can get training. And if Veracode is your product that you're actually using for doing analysis, whether it's dynamic or static analysis for your code, then it really helps to get training in that product and having your developers understand what that product puts out as well. So I think that this is interesting.
Also interesting from Veracode is a new report reveals that business leaders only address cybersecurity issues under duress. And John, I know you're very passionate about this story. I just want to read you a little bit. The report indicates that 25% of business leaders surveyed in Britain and the U.S. report that they do not understand any of these common cybersecurity threats: vulnerable software, ransomware, vulnerable open source components, phishing attacks, malicious employee activity, and DDoS attacks. Whoa.
Whoa. This is probably a loaded article. But okay, so when we talk to other security firms, security testing firms, one of the things that we realize is companies like InGuardians, BHIS, Trusted Sec, Secure Ideas, Rendition, we see probably the pointy end of the spear. We're seeing companies that are trying to do the right thing. And most of our customers, they come in with a fairly good understanding of what these things are. But whenever we talk to people outside of this space about our little group of firms that we know, trust, and love, it looks bad. A lot of the organizations don't bother trying to fix hardly anything because they don't understand at the executive level what the actual threats look like. I'll give you one example from us. We had one customer that said that they wanted us to come in and test for the Apache Struts vulnerability, and they wanted our pen test to be a pen test of Apache Struts. We're like, that makes
that's weird.
No sense to us.
For a lot of
reasons. Well, they didn't. At first, the most confusing was they weren't using Apache anywhere in their environment, but they saw it on the news and they wanted us to do a pen test. And we said, here's our approach on how we do a pen test. This is what we do. And they're like, that would be great. Everything you said sounds great. But if you exploited Apache Struts, it would really demonstrate risk to executive management because of what happened with Equifax and everything else. That was it. That was their sole understanding of computer security, is what they saw in the news with Apache Struts being used. And this, I think we're going to talk about Struts a little bit later. Yeah. But that's what most firms are seeing, that management has no idea. Like whenever you talk about what are their biggest risks, a lot of them will say WannaCry, Petya, not Petya, Apache Struts. Those are the three biggest security risks out there because that's what's in the news. They don't understand all the multitude of other ways that they can actually be attacked.
It's an educational opportunity, I think, for many business leaders. Would be my take on it. Fortinet launches operational technology security platform. I really don't know what that means, but it wasn't
not much to say here.
Operation like OT, like nice. for SCADA systems. So they're getting into the whole SCADA thing. I don't
know what an operational technology security platform. I don't know. I know that you try to be nice, and we try to be nice on the show whenever people have these announcements to kick them out. So it kind of kicks them far and wide. This one's really poorly done.
Industrial control systems will separate operational technology, as in the systems that are managing the industrial control systems, separate from information technology, which is managing the rest of the business and where those intersect and how those interact. A growing trend is to treat them more under the umbrella of security. I think we need to, and again, Allison Miller did a great job explaining this on the interview, that it's all business risk and that we separate out security as like a separate risk, but it's really just all under the umbrella of business risk.
That is
for ICS systems, huge, It's the same thing. Your risk to your operational technology and your risk to your information technology all encompasses business risk that needs to be taken into consideration. So Fortinet is trying to play in what we call operational technology security platforms, which, okay, that's fine, but it all hits business risk.
But I think that this gets into a larger issue that maybe we need to have a webcast or talk about. I think Rob M. Lee from Drago Security would be the best person to get on for this. So whenever we're looking at the SCADA ICS type environments, do we fundamentally need to treat those from an security architecture perspective differently than we do the rest of our assets? And there's a lot of people that say no. You can use one set of appliances to handle security for all of those different things. There's a lot of other people that say yes, they are fundamentally different precious snowflakes. And then, of course, there's other people that say you need to have multiple enclaves. And Paul, you and I would fall into this category. There would be multiple enclaves, and all of those enclaves need to be handled differently. So I don't know. It's an interesting conversation. It might be worth getting Rob on because he knows a hell of a lot more about it than pretty much anybody walking the planet right now.
Are we ready to talk about predictions?
Oh, God. I just tweeted this like 2 weeks ago. I said, brace yourselves. The security predictions for 2018 are coming. And Paul, how many of these? So you started Security Weekly, what, 2007 or 6? Or was it even 5? 2005. And I think it kind of peaked in 2008, 2009, where we were getting asked all the time to write articles. Mm-hmm. So I think you picked some really good ones. The White Hat one, I think, is a great one.
I think we need to talk about the White Hat one because it sums up predictions so well.
Should we talk about that one first?
So he says, basically, he says on December 13th, 2016, he's like, I posted in my prediction. And this quote sums it up. Nothing will change. Companies will continue to get breached because of simple vulnerabilities. Unfortunately, his prediction was correct and pretty much sums up everyone else's prediction that we're going to read in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Basically makes the same prediction. So they're kind of making fun of predictions. Basically, they made a very simple prediction, and obviously it comes true. And it's the same prediction that you can make every year and be 100% true, is that nothing's going to change, and companies are going to continue to get breached because of simple vulnerabilities.
I can't agree with this more. I mean, I remember, what was it? I can't remember what InfoSec Mag it was in 2008, where it was you, Larry, and myself. I think Carlos may have done it too, where we wrote up our predictions, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, we were trying to be very flamboyant and trying to talk about what things were going to be. And yeah, it ultimately comes down to the simple prediction. Simple security vulnerabilities are going to burn you. You're not going to get burnt by a 0-day. You're not going to get burnt by some next generation cloud security vulnerability. It's going to be simple mistakes. Like the gentleman, Jeff, we just interviewed. He's talking about, so you had SSH open to the internet with an easy to guess password. What the hell were you thinking? That's not some kind of leet type vulnerability or an exploit that was being leveraged. It's just stupidity or a mistake or an oversight. And those are the things that we see absolutely every day. And I think if you're trying to secure your enterprise with super advanced endpoint security products, super advanced artificial intelligence algorithms, and you can't even get through a basic vulnerability assessment without multiple reds and purples, you have much larger issues that you need to contend with right now.
I think the other interesting aspect of white hat security, which we're identifying as basically an entirely new category here on Security Weekly, and next year we're launching a new show called Application Security Weekly. And the prediction goes on to say, yes, we'll continue to get breached. However, more companies will start adopting DevSecOps, which I'm not into the whole like it's just DevOps.
Just be app security.
It's DevOps is what we're calling it, application security. DevOps is definitely a term that's going to stick around. I think there's lots of variations that will come and go. But basically, they say it's bringing together development, security, and operations. And I think that's going to be a theme from now into the future.
But why is this new, Paul? So this is one of the questions I have, is the idea of development, security, and operations. And let me know when you're done coughing. You went on mute. Honestly, what has changed with that idea of trying to integrate those three different components? DevOps is a fundamentally different way of approaching developments and trying to do deploys and trying to do pushing out of new application code stacks and updates and patching. And I think that that's a good idea. But honestly, these three things of development, security, and operations being more or less intertwined and having a kind of a unified approach on how you find vulnerabilities in operations and how you find vulnerabilities in development, integrating that into a life cycle that's more agile and is happening on a more regular basis is something, goddammit, we've been talking about for the past 15 years. And it's going to be interesting to see how this continues to evolve and grow. And if they have to create a new umbrella and a new name for it, so be it. But it's something that we've been talking about for a long time, as Paul and I are getting more and more brown, more and more gray in our beards and losing more and more hair. We're saying the same crap we said a decade ago.
And I think
Paul, you better now?
Well, yes, thank you. Traditionally, development did their thing. They developed code, someone in a bubble. They threw it over the wall to QA. They did some testing. QA kind of throws it over the wall to operations that puts it in production. Security may come in at various points over time and say, well, developers, you really shouldn't have cross-site scripting and SQL injection and buffer overflows in your code. So maybe you need this tool, maybe you need this training, and largely ignored QA. And then went to operations and said, well, you can't put vulnerable stuff into production, like go fix your vulnerable stuff. I think that in the new way, it's all one cohesive process that incorporates security, operations, and development throughout the entire process. And that's what I truly believe that DevOps is accomplishing with containers and new development processes, that it's a continual process, that security and operations, QA, development are all working in unison to make sure that code is going out clean, that we can push and test a new release, whether that's code, whether that's an application that it depends on, and make these updates more quickly and not say, we have a struts vulnerability. Oh, God, that's bad. That's like 3 to 6 months worth of testing. We can say, oh, by the way, yeah, we had that struts vulnerability, and in our last 24-hour cycle, we already tested it and pushed out a new version, and the code that we needed to modify to work on the new version has already been pushed out. That's the level that we're getting to, and that's going to be an area of focus in the way that we do software from now until the end of, well, maybe not to the end of time, but definitely for the next cycle.
Right? I think it is going to be not till the end of time, but it's going to be for a good long time. And I think that DevOps approach, let's talk about like these big punctuated events. It used to be whenever you put out patches, it happened once every 3 months, and it was a monstrous event. If you did code release, it was this monstrous point release, and it happened once a year. And that sucked, right? Because it was incredibly painful. It was very difficult to do. Security came on at the end and basically shot a hole in absolutely everything and made a whole bunch of stuff go back to the beginning, created mass panic and woe. Now, when we're looking at DevOps, the idea that we're doing continuous release, we're doing continuous updates, we're doing continued code fixes, and it's not in these big releases for bug fixes. It's something that's happening all of the time. I think that now forced security to be part of that overall approach continuously happening, because you can't just put security at the end, because there is no end. It's not like the end of this stretch or this release cycle, because the release cycle is happening almost daily now. And I think finally security is getting what we've always asked to be part of, that full software development lifecycle, simply by the requirements of DevOps and that continuous release and that continuous update happening all the time. We're getting involved because we have to, because there is no 3-month period at the end of that stretch where we do security testing at the end. There is no end. It's something that's happening all the time.
Now, what's interesting, Evident.io published its predictions, and this is one of them, that the DevOps lifecycle will permeate. They also say container and serverless computing ramps up, creating security headaches. And I think that's an important point. Well, largely the rest of the Evident.io article is, just other stuff to attract attention. Their first 2 points are spot on. The first one is the one exactly that we're talking about. The second one is the security ramifications of this new process, John, that when we push out all of these containers and do all of this new style of development, now what does security look like? There's a lot of startups that we're talking to, doing briefings with, to understand their technology. We did an interview with the founder of StackRox on Startup Security Weekly. We're talking to lots of other companies about how they're approaching and how you do security in this new environment. While we have all of this new technology that lets us push code out faster and test it more easily, however, it's an entirely new environment that involves Docker, it involves Kubernetes, and you have a registry and all of these things. In fact, my talk for next year that I've submitted to at least one conference already is my journey with implementing Docker, taking a traditional application, putting it inside of containers, how I got it working, and all of the oh shit moments that I had of, so how does security work? And then, the testers saying, well, I got into an application and I was dumped in a container and I didn't know what to do. Really fast, people are going to know what to do, and it could be bad. And I don't think we have a good solution. We might have potentially good solutions. We're not even close to thinking about how they're implemented in our environments yet.
And I think the only way that we do this is we push security testing down the stack to the developers. And that's something you and I did a webcast 2 years ago on, where we were hey, Zap is free. You should have every developer have Zap installed and know how to use Zap so they can test their code. And that's great for web applications. But when you start dealing with APIs, and I think that was one of the things in this Evident.io article
increased attacks
talking
on
about
APIs. Yeah.
And we don't really have a good set of tools right now to do that type of testing on APIs as cleanly as we'd like at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that the new DevOps model, in my mind, when I went on my journey, one of my aha moments was I can do testing in a more automated fashion more easily in this new model. And that's really awesome. But those methods need to be developed and implemented in the process. Yeah. And that's going to take time. And what do we do in the meantime? So absolutely. I think actually there were some pretty good predictions, John.
This time you got a pretty good slot of them.
Yeah. Was there anything else? RiskSense, Apache struts. We talked about struts.
Yeah,
basically struts is a flaming piece of crap is really what it comes down to.
My fear is that almost any major open source product, not major, let's say second tier open source product, if you're getting away from some of the big ones that are out there like Linux and Apache, struts, of course, is part of Apache and can be part of Apache. I have this nagging suspicion that almost any second tier open source product that's out there is an absolute train wreck. So we'll have to see. And before the show, we were talking about it. Remember whenever they finally started doing analysis of OpenSSL, and we found out that it was 2 guys, a cat, and a really hungry gerbil that were writing the OpenSSL libraries that everything runs. And it was kind of a wake-up call for the community that
Yeah.
we need to get more involved in actually doing some security assessments. But that's open freaking SSL. As you step back to some of these other technologies, are they getting the rigor and analysis that they need?
That's a good point. Well, that concludes the Enterprise Security News for today and this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. John, thank you very much. Thanks to our special guest, Jeff Schilling. We'll see everyone next time. Thanks for listening and watching.